Vance sat on the edge of the worn-out couch in the small living room he shared with his fiancée, Tasha. The late afternoon light slipped between dusty blinds, revealing motes that drifted and danced. There was a tension in the air that hadn't been there even a week ago. Tasha paced behind the coffee table, arms crossed tight over her chest. "I just need something more," she said, her voice quivering with an unfamiliar urgency. "I've been thinking about it for months. I don't want to pretend anymore." Vance looked up at her, drumming nervous fingers against his knee. "You're saying you want to bring other people into our relationship," he said, as though needing to clarify the absurd. "You think that's going to strengthen what we have?" She pressed a hand to her temple, as if warding off a headache. "Yes," Tasha said. "I know it sounds strange, but we're so close to our wedding. We've only ever slept with each other, and I'm terrified of feeling trapped, or that I missed out. I feel like I need to expand." He stared at her long enough that the motes of dust seemed to slow in the air. "And you want me to be on board? Do you realize how that sounds? 2 weeks before we get married, you start talking about sleeping with other men?" "I'm not talking about flings in dirty motel rooms," she said, though her tone was edging on frustration. "People do this. Open relationships, polyamory. It's a real thing. It saves couples from jealousy or resentment, or it introduces it," Vance said quietly, a grim half-smile on his lips. "Let's be honest." Tasha's eyes narrowed. She had always been strong-willed, even a bit arrogant. "So you won't even consider it? Don't I get a say in how I envision our marriage?" He swallowed back a surge of anger. "When you say open, you mean you want the freedom, but you don't want me to do the same, right? That's what you implied last night. You can go on random hookups, and I'm supposed to be faithful." She lifted her chin, letting her thick black hair tumble behind her shoulders in one quick motion. "Because it's different for women. If you start sleeping around, you might see it as a new beginning and ditch me for some new fling. But if I do it, it's just a little exploration. I'm in this for us. I love you, Vance. I just need more." "Do you hear yourself?" he said, rubbing his temples. "You're basically telling me you get to wander outside the lines without consequence, and you expect me to just stand there, nodding with some goofy grin on my face?" "It's not like that," Tasha insisted, though her voice shook slightly. "It's about me feeling free. You've always told me how confident I am, how I shouldn't hide who I am. This is who I am, Vance. I need a life that doesn't weigh me down." "Marriage weighs you down?" he asked with a bitter laugh. She put her hands on her hips. "Is it so wrong to want everything? To have a husband who's there for me while also keeping some excitement for myself?" "Plenty of people would say yes, it's wrong," Vance said, his tone flat. "But I guess those same people would tell me I shouldn't marry you then." Her gaze flashed. "What are you saying?" He stood up abruptly, nearly knocking the coffee table aside. "I'm saying that if we're even discussing open relationships right now, we shouldn't be heading down the aisle. You can't just call off the wedding," Tasha said, stepping into his path so he couldn't storm out of the room. "My parents have spent thousands. Yours have too. My mother will kill me if I ruin this, and your mom—" Vance laughed darkly. "So that's all it is? You care more about how your parents will react than about us." She jabbed him in the chest with her fingertip. "That's not fair. I'm trying to be honest with you, to share what's in my mind. Isn't that what you've always wanted? Didn't you tell me once you'd rather know the ugly truth than some pleasant lie?" "I never realized your ugly truth would be that you can't handle monogamy," he said. "But you know what? Fine. Let's see if I can handle it. Let's see if I can stomach the idea of you hooking up with your boss or a coworker or random guys while I sit at home like a saint. Maybe that's exactly who you want me to be. Spineless. Maybe that's why you picked me." She gave him a venomous glare, but she didn't say no. Instead, she brushed past him toward the window. The conversation simmered to a halt, leaving a tension in its wake that felt like an electric current dancing through the dusty air. The next few days became a bizarre dance of avoidance. Tasha still planned wedding details, calling vendors to confirm times and final payments, while Vance pretended to nod along, a quiet storm raging inside him. Every time he watched her, he saw an unfamiliar expression on her face, an aloof confidence that made him wonder if she was hiding more than just fantasies about an open relationship. One evening, she came home late, stammering out excuses about extra hours at work. Vance noticed that Tasha had undone the top 2 buttons of her blouse. She had an odd flush on her cheeks and messy hair that suggested more than just stress. In that moment, a terrible suspicion bloomed in his mind. He decided to test it. Tasha, he said casually, how about we go out for dessert tonight? There's that cafe you love on the east side. She seemed startled, caught off guard. I'm exhausted, she said, dropping her purse onto the side table. I'm sorry, I need a shower in bed. He nodded slowly, forcing a smile. Of course. She disappeared into the bathroom, and he heard the water running moments later. He went straight to her purse. Digging through the pockets, he found a fancy business card. Martin Blackwood, Regional Director, Everest Technologies. A number scrawled on the back in Tasha's handwriting. Had a great time. Vance stared at it, heart hammering. So she's not just daydreaming, he muttered. She's actually doing it. He put the card back, exactly where he found it, and stepped away. Ears buzzing, fury pulsing behind his eyes, he pictured her. And this Martin Blackwood, maybe sneaking off after hours. For a moment, he wanted to barge into the bathroom and demand answers, but he held back. He had a suspicion he was losing grip on his own sanity. Still, if Tasha was truly hooking up with her boss, he had no clue if Martin was the boss, but the job title sounded high up. He wanted proof. The next few days, Vance started paying more attention. Tasha came home wearing expensive perfume she never used around the house. She excused herself on phone calls. She even mentioned Martin in passing. He's so innovative, she said one evening. He's teaching me so many new things about sales and marketing. I feel like my career is about to skyrocket. She wore a proud smirk that made Vance's stomach churn. He became obsessed with the notion of catching her red-handed. If she wanted an open relationship so badly, why hide it? Did she think he was too stupid to notice? The insult weighed more heavily on him than the actual betrayal. Days turned to nights of restless suspicion. Finally, a moment of pure happenstance arrived. Vance was in the tiny kitchen, rummaging for something to drink, when Tasha's phone began to ring in the other room. She'd left it lying on the sofa. He moved toward it, curious who might be calling at that late hour. The screen lit with the name Martin. Then it went silent and lit up again with the same name. He pressed the phone to his ear without greeting. The line sounded muffled, as if Martin hadn't realized the call had connected. Tasha, Martin said, his voice low and amused. I'm still thinking about earlier, you know? The way you said you're done with that fiancé nonsense. God, it's exhilarating. I want to see you tomorrow. Let's do it at my place this time. The blood rushed out of Vance's face. He couldn't speak, transfixed by the blatant admission. Then Martin paused, maybe noticing no response. Tasha, you there? Hello? Vance ended the call, his hand trembling. He dropped the phone onto the couch just as Tasha walked in from the bedroom, wearing sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, looking mildly alarmed. Who was that? She said, noticing the phone in his hand. She must have recognized the look on his face because her eyes widened. Vance? Did you answer my phone? I sure did, he said in a low voice, heat flushing his cheeks. Martin was calling. He's quite bold, isn't he? She blanched, her mouth opening and closing with no sound. Finally, she sputtered. I can explain. Martin's my boss, or close enough. He's a big deal in the company. He's been helping me. Helping you cheat on me, Vance said with a bitter laugh. I get it. So that's the big push for this open relationship. You've already started it on your own. She tried to place a hand on his arm, but he yanked it away. It's not exactly what you think, Tasha said, a frantic edge in her voice. I did bring up the open relationship because I was attracted to him, but I didn't think... It was just supposed to be an option, something we'd talk about. What a load of garbage, he said. You're already messing around with him. That's not an open relationship, Tasha. That's good old-fashioned cheating. Her face twisted with anger. Don't you judge me like you're some saint. I told you how I felt, but you brushed me off, acted like my needs were insane. You're the one who's always put your job at the sanitation plant above me, always told me to be patient. Well, Martin sees my potential. He's not content to let me waste away as some bored wife who never explores her passions. Vance gritted his teeth. So you wanted to explore your passions with him? Yes, she snapped, folding her arms. And now I realize I shouldn't have bothered even telling you anything. We could have gotten married, and I'd do my thing on the side. At least that way, everyone would be happy. He stood still, absorbing the coldness of her words. You know something, he said quietly. You and Martin deserve each other, she glared. I don't deserve to be judged by a man who can't see beyond his own ego. I wanted a bigger life, not a monotonous treadmill where I keep waiting for you to propose real excitement. Vance let out a sharp breath, struggling against the urge to scream at her. Instead, he turned on his heel and grabbed his jacket from the coat rack. "We're done," he said, voice taut. "I'm calling off the wedding. Don't worry about my parents' deposit. I'll handle it. You can explain to yours why the big day is off." He brushed past her without waiting for a reaction, leaving her stunned in the living room. As he stepped outside into the crisp night air, he felt his heart hammering with a combination of hurt and fury. He knew at that moment he didn't just want to break things off. He wanted revenge. Tasha's arrogance burned in his mind all night. Sleep eluded him. Images of her with Martin Blackwood gnawed at him, fueling a dark desire. He imagined Martin's smug face, his slick suits, and his luxurious SUV. Vance had seen pictures of it on Tasha's phone once. A pristine black monster with tinted windows and custom leather seats. He pictured Tasha riding in that car, giggling at Martin's jokes. The thought made Vance's stomach churn with venom. At dawn, Vance found himself huddled over his phone, searching the property records for Martin's address. He tried to reason with himself. This is crazy. Let it go. Just move on. But he couldn't. The more he thought about Tasha's arrogance, the more he needed to lash out. He wasn't some docile fiancé she could throw away after humiliating him. By the time he left the apartment, he knew exactly where Martin Blackwood lived. A giant new development in the upscale part of town, the kind of place with gated entrances and private security cars drifting around. Vance's job with the sanitation company gave him access to certain large vehicles, ones typically used to pump waste out of septic systems or portable toilets. He'd driven them many times. The stench was unforgettable, but after a while, you got used to it. Or you learned to harness it, he muttered to himself, forcing a grim smile. He spent the next days quietly gathering details. He checked Tasha's schedule from a distance, noticing when she was staying late. He discovered from an online source that Martin was hosting an out-of-town business partner for dinner on Friday, meaning Martin might be out of the house for hours. Vance planned meticulously. He didn't want half measures. He wanted an act so disgusting, so humiliating, that Martin and Tasha would recoil at the mere mention of his name for the rest of their lives. On Thursday night, Tasha barged in after 9 p.m., having not seen Vance in a couple of days. She found him in the living room, packing clothes into a duffel bag. There were boxes piled near the door. He was clearly planning to move out. "Vance," she said, attempting a gentler tone, "we need to talk." He barely looked at her. "We talked plenty," he said, zipping his bag. "I've got my own plans now." She strolled closer, arms crossed. "My parents are furious you called off the wedding," she said. "They're saying you owe them for all the money they put down. I think you should help pay them back. It's not fair for me to do it alone." "You want me to pay for a wedding you destroyed?" He gave her a cold stare. "That's funny." She rolled her eyes. "Don't play the victim. You're the one who refused to adapt. If you just listened, maybe we could have worked it out. Come up with some arrangement that kept us both happy." He turned, fury tightening his throat. "You think I want an arrangement where you sleep with your boss and call me spineless behind my back? If that's your idea of happiness, you can keep it." She flushed, pulling a strand of hair behind her ear. "I never called you spineless." "You might as well have," he snapped. "You think I'm just going to stand aside and let you do whatever you want?" She exhaled, frustration bleeding through her expression. "You know what?" she said, voice shaking. "I'm done trying to reason with you. You were always so timid, so content with your job pumping waste. Maybe that's all you ever wanted in life. But I want more, and Martin gets it." He took 2 steps toward her. The anger radiating from him made her lean back, though her expression stayed defiant. "Enjoy your fancy boss," Vance said. "Just don't come crying to me when it blows up in your face." She let out a scoffing laugh. "It won't blow up. Martin is 10 times the man you are." "Sure," Vance said softly. "You both deserve each other." Without another word, she pivoted on her heel and stormed out, leaving him shaking with rage. He closed his eyes, inhaling slowly, letting the toxic combination of heartbreak and fury settle. "I've had enough," he thought. "Time for payback." Friday night arrived. The sanitation truck he'd borrowed was loaded with one of the foulest cargoes imaginable. Sludgy human waste from a large septic tank behind a local restaurant that had repeated plumbing issues. The odor was so awful that Vance had to keep the windows open while driving. But he didn't mind. "This is exactly what I need," he told himself. Filth for filth. He drove across the city under cover of darkness, the dull hum of streetlights reflecting off the truck's grimy tank. By the time he reached the gated community, it was nearly 10 p.m. As anticipated, the security guard at the front gate gave the truck a cursory glance. probably assuming it was a routine maintenance call or some schedule he wasn't informed of. Vance mumbled something about an emergency leak at one of the houses, and the guard waved him in without pressing. Martin's mansion stood at the end of a curved driveway, lined with manicured hedges and ornate lamps. The wide, modern facade had floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a pristine interior of marble and glass. Parked in the driveway was Martin's gorgeous black SUV, shiny, freshly waxed, the reflection of the overhead lamp gliding along its side. Vance ground his teeth. He remembered Tasha gushing over the vehicle's plush seats, the surround sound system. We'll see how plush it is after tonight. Climbing out of the truck, he quickly uncoiled a thick industrial hose that connected to the sewage tank. The stench was immediate, suffocating. Vance pulled a scarf up over his mouth and nose, then crept around the side of the SUV. He flipped a valve on the truck, reversing the usual suction to an outflow mode. A faint mechanical hum vibrated through the hose. "Here we go," he muttered. He aimed the hose at the rear panel of the vehicle and opened the flow. A vile, viscous mass of sewage erupted, splattering across the shiny paint with a wet thwack. Pungent waves of disgusting lumps and watery muck formed grotesque shapes as it trickled down the side. The impact was so loud in the quiet suburban street that Vance flinched. Within seconds, the SUV's polished perfection was obliterated under a thick, reeking layer of human waste. Vance moved along the length of the vehicle, feeling a sick triumph with each cascade of sludge. A voice in his head told him this was beyond reason, that he was crossing lines no decent person should cross. Yet he couldn't stop. He felt an electric thrill surging through him. He circled the SUV, adjusting the nozzle to spray the wheels, the windshield, the roof. Filthy torrents dripped onto the cement driveway, leaving swirling pools of rancid liquid. Martin's precious baby was now the epitome of repulsion. But Vance wasn't finished. He wanted Martin to come home to an interior equally defiled. He walked to the front door, carefully trying the knob. Locked, of course, but the place had massive windows. With the crowbar he'd hidden in the truck, Vance stepped to a side panel of glass. He jammed the crowbar near the frame, prying and jostling until he heard the crack of splitting wood and the tinkle of shattered glass. Pulling shards away, he created an opening big enough to slip the hose inside. The odor wafting from the nozzle was nearly overwhelming. He reached in and made sure it could spray across the living room floor. Then he opened the valve a second time. A macabre waterfall of sewage exploded into Martin's pristine living space, splashing the walls, the furniture, the marble tile. "That's what you get," Vance whispered, voice nearly trembling with savage glee. "That's what you get for thinking you can humiliate me." Behind him, headlights flickered across the driveway. He tensed, dropping the hose. A dark coupe pulled up, halting near the curb. The driver's side door swung open. Martin stepped out, wearing an expensive suit, eyes instantly widening at the sight of the sewage truck, the foul liquid streaming out of the side window into his living room. He let out a strangled cry, pure disbelief etched on his face. "What the hell?" Martin shouted, covering his nose and mouth as the stench hit him. "No, stop!" Vance strode forward, crowbar in hand. Martin recognized him and froze, eyes darting with panicked confusion. "You!" Martin managed to say. "What are you doing? Are you insane?" Vance let out a vicious laugh. "I'm insane? You slept with my fiancée, my soon-to-be wife, and you ask if I'm insane?" Martin backed up, bumping into his car. Tasha said you two had an arrangement. You can't do this, man." "Guess what?" Vance said, stepping closer. "It wasn't an arrangement. She lied. You lied. Now you're both going to see what it means to drown in the filth you created." Martin lunged toward the sanitation truck, presumably to flip the valve and stop the flow of waste. Vance was faster, swinging the crowbar to block his path. The metal clanged against the side of the truck, sparks flying. "Get away!" Vance bellowed, "or I'll smash your head in!" Martin stepped back, face contorting with anger and fear. "You're out of your mind. I'll call the cops." Vance pointed the crowbar at him. "Go for it. Then I'll tell them about how you seduced my fiancée, how you coerced her at work. Maybe your board of directors would love that. Maybe your family, your friends. I don't think you want that kind of scandal." Martin's gaze flickered with uncertainty. "This is more than just a scandal. You've destroyed my property. You broke into my house. Look at this place." They both glanced at the living room window. The shimmering sludge continued to spew, flooding the marble floors. Furniture tilted in the filthy tide, toppling lamps and rugs. The stench and destruction were beyond belief. Just then, another car screeched around the corner, headlights glaring. Tasha's sedan. She slammed the brakes, door flung open. She leapt out wearing a tight skirt and high heels, hair tossed as if she'd been out somewhere fancy. "Oh my God!" Tasha gasped, nearly retching at the smell. "Vance, what did you do?" Vance turned, adrenaline coursing through him. "You asked for excitement," he said, voice quaking. "Is this exciting enough for you, Tasha?" She stared in horror at the black SUV smothered in dripping sewage. "You're insane," she whispered, stepping forward cautiously. "I never wanted it to go like this." "It doesn't matter what you wanted," he hissed. "You disrespected me, made me look like a fool sneaking around with him. You told me you needed an open relationship, but you were already sleeping with him. Did you honestly think I'd just roll over and take it?" Tasha's face twisted with indignation. "You have no right to do this. Martin's going to sue you for everything you have." "I wouldn't be so sure," Martin snapped, glaring at her. "You told me your fiancé was a weak nobody. Now he's threatening to expose me to the board. Do you realize what you've dragged me into?" She whirled on him, outraged. "You're blaming me? You were the one who insisted on hooking up in your office. You kept pushing me to break it off with Vance. Don't turn this around on me." Vance let out a derisive laugh. "How sweet. Turning on each other already. Here, allow me to top it off." He stepped toward the truck to adjust the valve to full pressure, sending a heavier surge of sewage gushing through Martin's broken window. Martin ran forward, trying to grab Vance's arm. "Stop it, you lunatic!" He lunged, and the two collided with a dull thud. The crowbar fell from Vance's grip, clattering onto the driveway. Martin shoved him, but the slick ground made him lose footing, nearly toppling into the vile puddle near the curb. Vance jerked free and swung his elbow into Martin's ribs, forcing Martin to stumble back with a grunt of pain. Tasha screamed, "Vance, please, no more!" She hurried to the truck, but she only managed to stand there helplessly, daunted by the reeking onslaught. She tugged at the controls, but it was too complicated for her to figure out how to shut off the outflow. By then, Martin was gasping, furious and nauseous from the stench. "That's it," he shouted, snatching his phone from his pocket. "I'm calling the police right now." Vance took one menacing step forward. "Go ahead," he said. "But keep in mind, I've got recordings of Tasha bragging about your little escapades. It won't look good for you at corporate when they learn how you use your authority to pressure female employees. How many times did you pull that trick, Martin? You think HR won't do anything if a scandal this size comes out?" Martin lowered his phone slightly, rage and alarm battling on his face. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," Vance said. "You set this in motion. I'm just finishing it." Tasha, hands covering her nose, stared at both men. "You're twisted, both of you," she said, though her voice wavered. "I never should have asked for anything. I never should have told you." "Silence," Vance spat, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You want to talk about what should or shouldn't have happened. Maybe we should talk about how you flaunted your affair under my nose. Maybe we should talk about how you thought I was a nobody, no threat. Well, guess what? You found out you were wrong." He moved around the truck, yanked a lever that gradually started decreasing the outflow. "I think this has gone on long enough," he muttered. Indeed, the driveway was awash in a nauseating flood. The shattered window continued to disgorge sewage into the house, though at a slower rate now. The inside looked like a disaster zone, and the smell would linger for weeks, maybe months. Martin coughed, tears in his eyes from both the fumes and the rage. "I'll have you locked up," he growled. "I'll find a way around your blackmail threats." "Go ahead and try," Vance said, shrugging. "I'll make sure your entire board sees a full report of your extracurricular activities, plus Tasha's statements about your meetings, the screenshots of your calls and texts. Try explaining all that while your $1 million house rots under a layer of sewage." Tasha glared at Martin. "This is your fault," she said. "If you hadn't insisted—" "I insisted?" Martin snapped. "You were the one whining about your fiancé being a spineless wimp. Don't pin this on me." Vance gave a cold, humorless laugh. "I told you two that you deserved each other." He moved to the passenger side of the sanitation truck, preparing to climb in. "Enjoy cleaning up this mess." Martin rushed forward again as if to stop him, but Vance was ready, aiming a fierce glare at Tasha. "Tell him to step back or he'll get worse," Vance said quietly. Tasha frantically grabbed Martin's arm. "Don't! He's not bluffing!" Martin shook with pent-up fury, but didn't advance. Vance climbed into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and reversed out of the driveway. In the mirror, he watched Tasha and Martin standing in the swirling muck, mouths covered, expressions contorted in shock and revulsion. Martin's once gleaming SUV was drenched in a thick layer of sewage, and from the broad window, a steady trickle continued to flood his sleek living room. Vance pressed his foot on the gas, the sanitation truck rumbling down the quiet suburban lane. He felt a thunderous pounding in his chest, a mixture of triumph, disgust, and burning adrenaline. The glare of streetlights swept across the truck's windshield. The reek clung to him like a second skin, but in that moment he didn't care. He had unleashed something vile and unstoppable, all in the name of revenge. He parked the sanitation truck behind the depot where he'd borrowed it. Nearly an hour had passed since he left Martin's home. He stepped out, peeled off his gloves, and wiped a fleck of rancid sludge off his cheek with the back of his sleeve. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen. Tasha. He ignored it. Moments later, it buzzed again, and he checked the messages out of morbid curiosity. "You bastard," Tasha had written. "You destroyed his house, his car. I can't believe you go this far. My parents are going to come after you for all the wedding costs if you don't fix this somehow. Do you hear me?" Vance let out a hoarse laugh, shutting the phone off. "Fix this somehow," he murmured. He found the phrase almost comedic, given the absolute destruction he'd caused. There was no fix for it. The only thing that remained was a story so vile it would keep Martin and Tasha's nightmares alive for quite some time. His mind wandered to the next steps. Tasha's family might try to sue. Martin might try to spin this in some clever way. But Vance knew he had enough blackmail material, enough phone logs, text messages, and maybe even Tasha's own confessions to keep them silent. If Martin risked exposing him, Vance would reciprocate with full force. He stared at the silent phone for a moment, realizing how empty and exhausted he felt. Vance trudged away from the depot, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He felt no satisfaction in what he'd done, just an odd, hollow calm. In the back of his mind, an echo of Tasha's arrogance mingled with Martin's outraged threats. "We'll see who dares cross me again," he thought, a grim undertone in his mind. Then, beneath that, a quieter voice said, "What have you become?" He had no answer. He just knew he'd been humiliated. And in one horrific night, he'd made sure they felt that same humiliation tenfold. No apologies, no second chances. The night was dark and cool against his cheeks, and the city's distant hum felt strangely indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded in that luxurious neighborhood. Life went on, ignoring the lumps of sewage and shattered glass and broken illusions left behind. He reached his old pickup truck, which was parked near the depot. As he climbed in, he caught his own reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were still burning with anger, his face smudged with grime. He looked like a stranger to himself. "This is what vengeance looks like," he muttered. "It ain't pretty." Gunning the engine, he drove off into the night, leaving behind the last traces of his old life. The canceled wedding, the fiancé who'd wanted an open relationship, and the illusions of a future that never would have worked. He was free now, or so he told himself. Free, and covered in the stench of his own dark revenge. He took one final glance in the mirror and pressed the accelerator, disappearing into the city lights.